4 weeks, including today, we're going to use the Light of the World by Amy Jill Levine, and it's called The Beginner's Guide to Advent. So to start out, I guess one of the things, what I'd like to do is just ask and have you guys kind of, you know, chime in. You can take yourself off mute and then just, you know, say what comes to mind. But when you think of Advent or the things around Christmas, what do you think of? What things come to mind, or do you remember? Don't be shy.
I say preparation, getting all the Christmas stuff up.
Okay.
Anticipation.
Okay.
Yearly question of, do we sing Advent songs or do we sing Christmas songs?
Okay.
As a kid, I was totally unaware of Advent.
All right.
Preparation for Christmas.
Preparation for Christmas.
For actually preparation for Christ, the birth of Christ. Yeah.
As a kid, we always had our Christmas programs, though. I was thinking about what Carol said. We always had our Christmas programs at school. We had our Sunday school. We had our stuff we had to memorize. So that was all part of it.
Okay. Anyone else want to share anything? How about around the story of the birth of Christ and what went around it that's in the Bible? What things come to mind?
The star.
The star.
Yeah. The three wise men.
Okay.
Following the.
I always put out several nativity sets that I've had that I purchased as I travel.
Mm-hmm.
And until a few years ago, I automatically always put out the whole set, you know, baby Jesus goes there. And then I went to a church service one time where they don't put Jesus out until Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. So you have the preparation, the waiting all the time of seeing all these mangers, but Jesus isn't physically there as a baby yet. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not sure what I'm going to do this year, but you know, it was a different perspective that I hadn't had prior.
Our daughter used to get a little adamant about the fact that you don't stick the wise men out there until later.
Mm-hmm.
Mine all have to come from the east, so they, depending upon the direction, yeah.
So, but that was one of her things. You know, Mom, they weren't there that night. So, any other characters or people that you remember as far as around before the birth of Christ?
Any from a Methodist perspective, it occurred to me several years ago of how we bring Mary out at Christmas time, and then she disappears for all practical purposes until maybe Easter. But not much emphasis has been placed on Mary. So we sort of drag her out and then put her back in the closets until Easter.
Yeah, the Catholic Church does much more with remembering Mary. Mary becomes a major figure, but I would say that's often true in the Lutheran practice as well.
Oh, it's not.
How about Zachariah and Elizabeth? Do you ever connect them to the story of Jesus' birth at all? I see head shaking. Well, that is actually the story that she spends some time with today. And so, and she entitled this session, "The Meaning of Memory." And so when you think of memory, just not like, you know, how good is your memory, but what do we remember? What do we need to remember? Who is it important to remember? So those items also come into play as she discusses this. And then interestingly enough, if you had the opportunity to hear Pastor Chris's sermon this morning, she talked about context. And Amy Jill also talks about the importance of understanding what was going on at the time, the context of which things happened, as far as how we understand things, and also the context of how we listen to the story today and how that has an impact on us. So with that, I'm going to have Chris play the video. And if we could get everyone on mute. Chris, you can do that. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Okay, go ahead and do your screen share.
I love Christmas. I like the candles. I like the trees. I even like the shopping. When I was a child, I used to go to my friend's house to help trim the tree. I had the best of both worlds. I got to trim the tree. I never had to put it away after the season. But I particularly love Christmas because I love the stories, the accounts, the different accounts we get in the Gospel of Matthew and we get in the Gospel of Luke, and we get also from post-biblical church legends. I will sometimes come into church and people get very somber and serious because it's Advent. But if we do, we're missing something. Matthew and Luke are stories of joy, and they're also stories of humor about an infertile couple who has a child, and that's the birth of John the Baptist. About the annunciation of the angel Gabriel to Mary, who says, "Mary, you're going to have a child," and Mary asks quite logically, "How exactly is that going to happen?" About Joseph, who discovers that his fiancée is pregnant and has a dream with an angelic prophecy from the prophet Isaiah telling him what to do. And those fabulous magi who aren't kings, and they're not necessarily three of them, they're Persian astrologers. They are figures of fun. They are fools for Christ. We need to see the profundity in the story, but we also need to see the joy, the challenge, the exuberation, to appreciate the story as story, a story that will give rise to multiple interpretations, and a story that continues to inspire. The Christmas story in the Gospel of Luke begins not with Jesus, but with Zechariah and Elizabeth. And we first meet Zechariah, who is a priest in the temple. Actually, there were too many priests at the time to serve on a daily basis in the temple. So this might have been Zechariah's one shot at the big time. He's doing the afternoon incense offering, and suddenly an angel appears to him. He's stunned, but you know, this is the Bible and it can happen. And the angel says to him that, "Zechariah, you're a righteous guy and your wife is righteous, and your wife Elizabeth, she will become pregnant." Zechariah somewhat discreetly says, "Well, yes, except I'm old and, you know, my wife is getting on in years." And the angel gets a little bit huffy. Look, he says, "I'm the angel." I'm reading here from the CEB translation. Zechariah said to the angel, "How can I be sure of this? My wife and I are very old." The angel replied, "I'm Gabriel. I stand in the Lord's presence." And I can just picture the angel with this look on his face saying, "What, you doubt?" Gabriel continues, "I was sent to speak to you and to bring this good news, this gospel, this oi angelion, this good news to you. Know this, what I have spoken will come true at the proper time, but because you didn't believe, you will remain silent, unable to speak until the day when these things happen. Poor Zechariah, he's just received good news. He's just received the gospel, and now he can't talk. But we have to worry about the professional situation as well, because following the offering, he is supposed to go out and bless the crowd. Here's how the CEB describes it. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah, and they wondered why he was in the sanctuary for such a long time. And when he came out, he was unable to speak to them. Then they realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he gestured to them and couldn't speak. When the Gospels were first produced, they were read out loud, indeed performed to congregations. And the fact is, a lot of people back in the first century were illiterate. They could not read. So I can picture so easily the storyteller explaining not only that Zechariah had been struck mute, and through his gestures, he explained to the crowd what happened. But how do you do that? How do you do in body language the idea that an angel appeared to me? Do you have wings? Do you have a halo? Do you have a look in your face? And the angel said, I'm going to have a baby. What was the crowd thinking when they listened to Zechariah? And more fun, what was the crowd thinking, those first audiences, those first churches, when they watched the Gospel of Luke being performed? How do you proclaim the good news in sign language? The angel Gabriel had told Mary not only that she would conceive a child, but that her elderly cousin Elizabeth, who had been suffering with fertility issues, has conceived herself. So Mary goes to visit Elizabeth. The scene is typically called the visitation, and it's in the Gospel of Luke. Here's how the CEB puts it. Mary got up and hurried to a city in the Judean highlands. She entered Zechariah's home and she greeted Elizabeth. I do wonder if Zechariah is there saying, but she greets Elizabeth, and when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. So we have this sense of quickening. Elizabeth feels life in her own body. So Elizabeth then, filled with the Holy Spirit, proclaims Mary's own pregnancy. With a loud voice, she blurted out, this is the translation here, but proclaimed is probably better, God has blessed you above all women, and he has blessed the child that you carry. Why do I have this honor that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as I heard your greeting, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Fabulous. Elizabeth here, although she's not called a prophet, is one. She recognizes from her pregnant cousin something more than just the good news of a pregnancy. She recognizes the mother of her Lord. She recognizes Jesus' role even before he is born. Zechariah, her husband, doubted the angel. Elizabeth, filled with the Holy Spirit, makes the correct proclamation, and Mary then responds. The Lucan Christmas story is filled with remarkable news, unexpected but urgently wanted, hoped for news. Zechariah is told that his elderly, infertile wife will bear a child. Mary is told that she will have a child even though she has not yet had sexual relations. We are told that this newborn baby will be yet had sexual relations. Mary's Magnificat, her hymn, sings about status reversal, past, present, and future. Magi see a star, the good news of the birth of a new king. Herod himself receives some news, not good, that his rule is illegitimate because the true king of Israel has just been born in Bethlehem. We have to be open to staggering news, and rather than just say, oh, that can't possibly happen, rather than have doubt, one of the beauties of the gospel is it helps us envision the world otherwise, see the world differently. Following the Gospel of Luke's 4-verse, very fancy introduction, Luke tells us During the rule of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to a priestly division, and so we launch into the story of the birth of John the Baptist. Following Mary's visit with Elizabeth, Elizabeth gives birth. John the Baptist is named, and there's some fuss about this because they wanted to name him after a family member, but Elizabeth, the prophet, says, no, his name will be John. And then the story of John the Baptist leads into the story of Jesus. But the setting is important here. For Luke, John the Baptist is set during the reign of Herod of Judea, locally, internally to the land of Israel. But the birth of Jesus has a slightly different setting. Chapter 2 in the Gospel of Luke begins, "In those days Caesar Augustus declared that everyone throughout the empire should be enrolled in the tax list." For Luke, Jesus is not limited to the people of Israel. To the contrary, his birth is set during the reign of a Roman emperor. And so we launch into the story of how Jesus was born not in Nazareth, which is where his family lived according to Luke, but in Bethlehem of Judea.
Thanks for playing that, Chris. And if you could give me hostess control back, that would be great. And get off of the share so I can see everyone. Are you there?
I am. I'm not sure quite how to do what you're asking me to do.
Okay.
We didn't
Okay,
practice
so
this part.
on the share screen, you would unshare.
I'm not seeing an unshare.
Well, what if you hit the share screen again? Does it stop it?
Stop share. Okay. There we
Okay.
go.
And then when you go into participants, if you click on my name, you can give me back hosting.
Ooh. Sweet.
You now have no more responsibilities.
Fantastic. Good
Well,
to see everyone. Have a great day.
Just for this, you still have your honey-do list.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So my question for you is, she talks about what is the profundity, joy, or challenge of this story? So you guys can unmute yourself or raise your hand or whatever, and I'd like to hear what do you think is profound in this story, or brings joy or challenges you?
Penny,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep.
Okay. Yeah, I have several things, but one of them is this historical fact? She calls it a story about 10 times. She talks about it being a story, and you got to remember that Amy Levine teaches at a theological seminary in a university.
Yep.
But I know she's not Christian. I think she's Jewish,
Yeah.
and so she calls it a story. And actually, I kind of relate to the story. But I just wondered, is there any history that any of this happened, other than it being part of the Gospel of Matthew and Mark, I believe, maybe all of them, about 50 years later. Is there any historical,
Well, okay. So
that's one of my challenges.
So
My challenges is this a story that was handed down, or are these actual facts?
Well, all I can speak to as far as that goes is that oftentimes we'll use the word story, and story can either be truth or fiction. And so she also talks about, if you're interested in all in the book that comes with it, that this isn't necessarily a Christian story, but it's a Jewish story. Now, I'm trying to find it where she said that here. She said because it was a priest in the Jewish tradition. It happened to his wife. There's all the connection between what we call the Old Testament and their Hebrew text, that this was something that was performed in telling the story before it was written down. So how to determine factual versus not, I don't know. That would be a question for Pastor Peter or Pastor Chris.
That's a good answer.
But, you know, to me, I listen to it and go, well, how would have I responded if I was, you know, at church and getting ready to say help with communion, you know, setting stuff out and getting all ready, and all of a sudden an angel shows up to me and I'm 61 and they say, you're going to have a baby. And I'd be like, yeah, right. You know, you know, I probably would still not be talking. So, and I guess for me, the other question is why is this story important to Luke? The nativity, birth stories, and all the stuff around in the gospel are in Luke and Matthew. And Luke is by far the largest as far as the amount of text that was written, and a lot of the stuff that happened before the birth. And Matthew has the Magi in it. Matthew tends to be written more for the Jewish faith people of the time, and Luke tries to extend out to the Gentiles as well as the Jewish population. So that's a little tidbit for you. So anyone else? Any joys or challenges, or what's profound to you about the story? No other thoughts right now?
Yeah, okay, well, it had to be profound and joyful for Elizabeth to know that she was going to have a baby because she'd been praying for it. And then, of course, for Mary also, because she was an unwed woman. And so that had to be profound all of a sudden. And did they, you know, would you believe that? You'd say, sure. And then Elizabeth felt the baby, so that answered that. So.
Yeah. So, and the community, can you imagine the community? You know, you wonder if Elizabeth really said anything to anyone, because it said it wasn't until 5 months when Mary came, and like, you know, did she want to make sure she was showing, because were people going to say she's crazy? Joanne, did you have something to share?
I'm thinking about the storytelling, and the whole Bible is storytelling. And the fact that the people in general could not read for the story tellers. Can you hear me?
You're kind of,
The storytellers were speaking to a nation of people that remembered their stories. And this one is not working. Oh, okay, I'll go quickly. This reminds us of Abraham and Sarah. The
yeah,
story,
thanks. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So Abraham and Sarah also went through this, which brings to question to me, why?
I don't know if you can hear me anymore.
You're breaking up quite a bit, Joanne, but I kind of caught some of what you said, I think. The whole idea of, you know, remembering.
I think the writers of the okay, go.
Oh, we're not hearing you anymore, Joanne. I'm sorry, because I think you have some really good things to say here. Let me see if I can.
I'm not.
Joanne, if you want to try going back out and coming in, I'll watch for you, okay? And that might help. So I'm gonna, so why does anyone have any idea why God might want to use stories of infertility, or, you know, Mary was a virgin, or, you know, whether we believe that as part of it now or not? Why is that part of these important stories in the Bible? What is God doing here? Any thoughts? Rita, it looked like you wanted to say something. There you go.
Shaking up the status quo just a bit.
Shaking up the status quo. Yeah. Make us pay attention to what's going on, maybe? Carol, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, kind of tying into that, experiencing unexpected things,
Story of beginning.
not being able to predict what God's going to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. The whole idea of maybe just reminding us to look for the unexpected. Don't miss it. And not just for big things, but maybe in everyday living. Joanne, did you have something you wanted to try again to say? You had your hand up, but you're frozen. No, we're still not hearing you. Yep. I'm sorry. Okay, so anything else?
Penny?
Yeah. Yeah, John.
Yeah, Penny?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Penny, I wonder if, I struggle with, is it fact or is it man? And I wonder if the issue of God answering every question directly.
Go ahead.
Okay, if that isn't more anomaly of it was human beings who actually wrote the Bible, wrote it down in a whether it be in Greek or in Latin or in certain versions, and they basically, and in those days, premarital sex was absolutely a taboo, and excuse me, and I just wonder if that isn't more due to the culture of the times when it was written, because then it is now, then it was God speaking, because the importance of virginity was terribly high in those days, and it and it has created, and he has created now, and I just don't know if God was saying that or whether mankind was reflecting their cultural beliefs at the time.
All right. Well, just remember though, with Abraham and Sarah and Elizabeth and Zechariah, it wasn't virginity. It was that they were infertile and past age of having children. So I think the comment of the story of Advent and its good news is kind of to shake us up a bit, to pay attention. And with the idea of Sarah and Abraham, the idea of Elizabeth and Zechariah, to remember what God has done in the past and the covenants that God has made with the people, and that remember that you can depend on God to stay with those covenants. So there's a lot of different references that go back to what we call the Old Testament, as far as where there seems to be a parallel of, okay, we need to remember again what was told in the past. Another thing is with the birth of, yeah.
I think that was what Joanne was trying to say. I asked her to turn off her video to see if maybe her sound would come through better. So maybe she can unmute and try sharing again.
Okay, yeah. Joanne, you want to give it another try?
I just tried. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you, Rita. My comment is that the writers of the Old Testament especially had a formula for the stories, and they repeated different scenarios, so that for example, if there was a pregnant woman or if there was a young woman by a well, the listeners knew that there was going to be an engagement story. And I don't know this for a fact, but I am thinking maybe, and I will look that up. We can look it up for next time, that if we have a scenario of an aged person like Sarah, or aged couple, it might be a story of new beginnings. That's just a stab. Did you hear that?
Yes, very good.
Did you hear that?
Yes, we did.
Oh.
So yay!
All right. It's a good thing I don't have to have my picture up here.
Interestingly enough, the name Zechariah means to remember too. So and the words of Gabriel to Zechariah kind of are connected to the prophecy of Malachi, and let me find that. Where is it now? He says, "See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord's come. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse." And so the birth of John is kind of like the new Elijah, where John's birth is to help turn people back to the back to relationship with God and the practices and the faith. And so there's this parallel again of Old Testament, New Testament, and it's always this matter of trying to maintain or reinvigorate that relationship and commitment of covenant between God and people. And so why, other than the birth of John, why the story of Elizabeth and Zechariah is important in this realm is still one of those questions that I would have. Why does Luke think it's so important? What are your thoughts?
Well, wasn't John to foretell the story of Jesus? He was the one that went out and prepared the way for Jesus, and they were cousins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's important. He foretold the story.
Okay.
Another thing I thought was interesting is that they wanted to name him something else. And Elizabeth said, no, his name has to be John. And the Jewish tradition is that children need to be named after a dead relative. So that probably broke the tradition because she just picked it. Well, she was told the name John.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
was Jesus Mary was told Jesus is to be named that.
So what do you think the reasoning for that is? Why break with tradition? I mean, that, everyone knew that you were supposed to do that. You're right. That is the Jewish practice of you name a child after a dead relative as part of the idea of remembering that person and honoring them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Maybe
Angel Gabriel says no.
Maybe because Jesus and John they were very important people. And the angel said that. So you do what angels tell you.
You do. Have you seen an angel lately?
Not lately.
Not lately. Yeah, that's a really good point about that story. So there's also
Penny, I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead and finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just going to say that. So there's all sorts of different things that don't follow the protocol, Zechariah gets his one big shot to, do the incense, bless the people, everything's all set, ready to go. And, an angel comes. Okay, well, this is not an everyday occurrence, and then, Elizabeth is going to be with child, and he's like, yeah, right. So there's another abnormal thing. So then he can't speak at all. So he can't come out and verbally. So can you imagine? Okay, here's your one shot. You get out there, and now you have to tell people, bless them and tell them what happened. So we don't have that as a norm. Then you have Elizabeth giving birth to this child, and then they don't follow the rules. So everything along the way is breaking the norm of Jewish tradition and what they should be doing. And so I don't know if it's supposed to give us an insight into the idea that this isn't just a Jewish story, that although family is important, it's not necessary to follow all of that to still have this connection. with God. So again, the term shake up, Advent kind of shakes us up from what traditionally might have happened to something extraordinary. So that's just some thought. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I was along the lines of the Jewish tradition of being named after a dead relative. Did Joseph have a dead relative by the name of Jesus?
We have.
So I don't think that tradition. I think that's the first I've ever heard of. I mean, I've certainly heard of that tradition, but I just wonder if that tradition is 80% rule.
Well,
where 80% of people do it, but 20%.
True.
But
yeah,
but if so, then was Jesus named after a
We're gonna just drop off here in a minute because I have no Jews.
We don't know. I suspect that if it had been important, it might have been mentioned. But again, it's and the idea of naming also oftentimes being directive to what your mission may be in life, especially when it comes from an angel, may have had some kind of a play in it.
Okay, Penny, but weren't they told to name Jesus Jesus?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why they named him Jesus. It could be also because my grandchildren are Jewish and they're named after, like Ramona, she was named after Grandpa Ralph because it had the R. So it could be maybe they knew somebody with a J that they wanted to honor. But the angel was the one that said, you name him Jesus.
Right.
But I wouldn't think you would argue.
You're not going to argue with an angel?
No.
Okay.
You'd be like Jacob.
Not going to take those chances?
Nope.
Okay, let me see what else. So she also talked about the idea of doubt versus being filled by the Spirit. That in the story with Zechariah and Elizabeth, Zechariah didn't believe it, but Elizabeth was filled with the Spirit. So if this story hadn't been present in the around the story of Jesus's birth, what would we have lost something in the understanding of how things were at the time? How people would have reacted to Jesus' birth? Any thoughts? Yeah, Lois. Can you unmute? Hang on, you're muted. Just a minute. I can help you with that.
I think I'm okay now.
Okay.
Anyway, just getting back into the sermon that we had today where Pastor Chris was saying that context is not a neutral. It's a very important part of what's going on. So I think that if we didn't have some of these stories to give us this context, we would lose something.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it back to that. So the context at the time was important. How is the context today important?
I think in the context there, we're talking about the Jewish people looking for a redeemer of some sort. I don't think they were looking for a baby, but there too, God did things in different ways. But when I think about the idea of Mary going to visit Elizabeth, if I were Mary's mother, I would believe an older woman's experience. I mean, I would believe Elizabeth's support for Mary. That would help me as Mary's mother, for instance. Just to have that reassurance that God was present in that crazy situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. That we would maybe, by not having her there, we would lose part of the whole gift of those more experienced people within the society and culture, that they have an importance to an appreciation for the hopefulness and what is about to happen. That their wisdom.
There was also, jumping ahead, there's the prophecy of Anna.
Mm-hmm.
When Jesus is actually born. So there's the prophecy, like you said, the prophesying of Elizabeth saying, the baby in my womb jumped, just on hearing Mary's voice, but also, then like Joanne said, that parallel story of as soon as Simeon and Anna saw baby Jesus in the temple, they prophesied at that point as well.
Yeah. So very interesting point. The importance of the elder within the context of the story. Any other thoughts or comments on it? This also takes place when Herod is king of Judea, which is, that's considered, kind of speaking in Judea, that would be the area of Israelites. Does that have a factor on the story for Elizabeth and Zachariah and the birth? Or does Herod have any concern over John's birth? I don't know if we really know. Possibly remembering some of the passages of the Old Testament, those prophecies that John, that there's going to be someone born that's going to tell the good news of a new leader. So even though John isn't the leader, the new king, he most certainly is setting the groundwork. It's almost like, I don't want you spreading this news around. So I would think that, there could have been some concerns even at that point. Anything else? This is so much harder to have these discussions like we usually do in the room than on Zoom. We'll get better at it as we go along. Any last thoughts on something that sticks out to you about this story, or maybe the ideas of thinking about this story more when we consider Advent? It wasn't something that initially came to mind to me when I thought of Advent. I guess when I think of Advent, I totally, in my mind, as far as the Bible story goes, I totally kind of forget this story and go right to, my head first goes to, well, Mary heard from an angel, she was going to have a baby, and then they have to trek on out of town, and they don't, and that's what I'm thinking of. I don't think of Elizabeth and Zachariah's story and the importance it might have as far as setting the stage and how it can remind us that we need to think in context of things, and how that can relate to us now and how it related to the people back then when the events were first happening. Any other thoughts or questions today? If anyone's interested in the book, you can get it. I was gonna say you can get it, you know, from a lot of online sources. I order it from Cokesbury. They seem to have the best prices. So if anyone's interested, you most certainly don't have to. And next week, I believe it's called The Promise of Potential. And it's going to be about Mary. So you can kind of give some thought about Mary if you want ahead of time, or you can come back, you know, without any thought at all. Anybody else?
I have an idea.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Marie's nativity sets, and I have different ones that I could show off. I wonder if different ones of us could take pictures of them and send them to you, and you could make some sort of screen to share, like a
Sure.
collection of pictures.
That's a neat idea. That's a very neat idea. How do you, you know, what your nativities look like and how you set them up, and
We could just email them to you.
sure, sure. You guys all have my email address. Yeah, if anyone's interested in doing that, that's a really fun idea, Rita. Thank you for that. Or if maybe you don't have it as a nativity set, but maybe you have some kind of a wall hanging or something that you use. I know there's some pretty fancy quilters around. You never know what you might have. Okay.
I was thinking when, after Marie said that, you know, really, we should just have the stable there and the animals, and not Mary and Joseph,
Yeah.
and not the shepherds, and not the wise guys, you know, until Epiphany. I mean, really, I had just never thought about that before, but just the empty stable, or with the animals there, perhaps. But anyway, just something that crossed my mind when she said that. So
Yeah, you could have Mary and Joseph way off in a distance with a donkey.
Yeah.
Making their way.
yeah.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you all so much for sticking with us today, and I hope you gained something from it. And I look forward to next week seeing you guys. So
Thank you, Penny.
thank you.
Bye.
You have a good week.
Thank you, Penny. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.